Hi, welcome to Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura, and today we are going to take a trip into the city of Ambergris. And believe me when I say that visiting Ambergris really is a trip. There is a review on, it's 3 different books, and there's a review on the cover for one of them. And the reviewer says that the book is borderline hallucinogenic. And I would agree. And that's one of the reasons I like books by Jeff Vandermeer, specifically Southern Reach and Ambergris, is they are just very trippy. And they're just very weird and they make you think. So the author Jeff Vandermeer is most well known for the Southern Reach trilogy, and that is 3 books, the first of which, Annihilation, was made into a movie in 2018 starring Natalie Portman, directed by Alex Garland. And both are amazing, and the Southern Reach trilogy I loved. And for my Book First Movie podcast, I compared the first book, Annihilation, with the movie Annihilation. And then after I read the full trilogy, I made a video of me just sharing my thoughts on the trilogy. So if you're interested in those, I will link to them down below. To compare it with the Southern Reach, so the Southern Reach is all like a linear telling of a story. And if you tried to pick up the 3rd book in the series, like, you would be so lost, and like it would just be dumb to try to read the 3rd book and not the other 2. Whereas with Ambergris, I've read that it's pretty common for people to just pick up the 3rd book and they just read that one. And I mean, it can be done. You might be a little lost the first chapter or 2, but then, you kind of get a hang of it. But it does, I think it helps to have read the first 2, though, ultimately, to really have a grasp for the events going on and to understand the city of Ambergris. So yeah, the 3 books, they're not directly connected the way most series and trilogies are, but they all take place in Ambergris, and they all have interconnected characters. And so yeah, and the more you read, the more you understand the stuff you previously read. And so it just helps to have read all of them ultimately. And then, not to do too much comparing to the Southern Reach, but the Southern Reach is definitely a sci-fi series. And Ambergris, I wouldn't really call it sci-fi. The 3rd book, Finch, is the most sci-fi-esque. But the first 2, I don't know. They're not fantasy either. It's just a strange, weird city. And the only thing that's otherworldly about it is the fact that there are mushroom people that live there. And that's what drew me into these stories. So the first time I heard about it was about Finch. And yeah, that it's a city that's inhabited by people that, it has normal people as well as people that are like mushrooms. So it's just such a unique idea. And the city itself is just there's mushrooms growing all over the place. And then you have these actual mushroom people who are called gray caps. So yeah, fascinating concept. Vandermeer, he just created this city just in such detail, and not just the way it looks and it feels and its inhabitants, but its history too. It feels like it should be a real place because we just learn so much about it. So he just really fully created this world of his. And then as I get into talking about each book, there will be some spoilers for each one. And having said that, there is so much to these books, so even though I'm going to spoil a few things in this video, you could still go on to read the books and there would still be stuff in there that you didn't realize was going to happen, But having said that, if you want to read these books and not know any of these major plot events, then you should not watch this video because I will be sharing some spoilers in here. And the reason I do that, I personally, when someone is doing an in-depth book review, even if they don't have spoilers, I tend to wait to watch those until after I've read the book. Because after I've read a book, especially one I like, I just want to read what other people have thought about it. And so yeah, if people are like me and are wanting to learn more about Ambergris and hear other people's thoughts after they themselves have read it, then it doesn't matter if I give spoilers because they've already read it anyway. So I guess I'm kind of catering this to an audience that is similar to me and is interested in watching videos like this after the fact. But even so, if you've never read the books, you can still watch this video. A couple things might be spoiled, but there's still plenty of details in the book that will be new to you when you go and read it. So getting right into this, the first book is City of Saints and Madmen, which, what a cool title. I just love that title. And this book contains 4 short stories at the start that are like 100 pages each. And then the second half is like this appendix that has more short stories, but these ones are much shorter. So they're like, I don't know how many pages long they are, but they're considerably shorter, and so there's just a lot of them. And if you have gotten the Ambergris series in the omnibus version, which looks like this, then this one, City of Saints and Madmen, has been cut in half. So you get the main 4 stories, and then you get one more story from the appendix, but the rest of them have been left out. And there's some good ones in there that are left out. So if you read the omnibus version and you really enjoyed it, then you should definitely seek out an edition that has the rest of the stories. That way you can just learn even more about Ambergris. And the one I read was published, an edition from 2006. So this was first published in 2001, and I actually ordered that edition. I'm not home right now though, so I'll have to wait till I'm home to actually get it. But I also ordered the first edition, which is paperback, and that one was shorter. But Vandermeer, he just kept adding more and more stories. So then I ordered a later edition, which is hardcover, and that one was a year later after the first edition and has more to it. Basically, I've become obsessed with this series, and when I see that there's all these various editions, specifically City of Saints and Madmen, because he re-released it and he kept adding to it, and so I'm excited to get those other editions. But anyway, so if you read the omnibus version and you enjoyed the stories and you want more, get one of these that has the full story in it. The omnibus version does include The Cage, which is one of the stories from the appendix. And this was a good one to choose to include because it is very creepy and I really enjoyed that one. But it also, from the appendix, I also really liked Learning to Leave the Flesh, which was weird. And some of these stories I don't totally understand and I would need to go back and read them again, but I still really enjoyed them. But Learning to Leave the Flesh and then The Exchange I thought was really fascinating, as well as like The Third Hour of Death was kind of a weird one. But yeah, there's also one, like a document that a guy wrote about squids, because Ambergris is known for its freshwater squid. And after this guy's document about his research about the squids, it's followed by like pages of his bibliography. But don't skip through those, because as he's citing these different books, not for each one, but for some of them, he'll like insert his thoughts on the book or he'll summarize the book. And then as it goes on, he just shares more personal things that are going on with him, I guess, basically. And it gets a little weird, which is what you would expect to happen, I guess. And so to talk about the 4 stories at the beginning of City and Saints and Madmen, the first one is Dradin in Love. And I thought this was a great intro to the city. You have Dradin, who is going crazy. And he's also just so naive, and he also has never been to Ambergris before, so he is learning it along with us at the same time, you know. And the mushroom dwellers, the gray caps, they are talked about, but it's pretty brief, and it's like enough to pique your interest as far as the gray caps. And it's also, you know, we learn about the Festival of the Freshwater Squid, which is an event that happens every year, and it always ends in violence. And that's the day that he is there, and so we're learning about this festival and experiencing it the same time he is, and it's just so bizarre. Yeah, I thought this was a great story and a great intro into the city. Like, going into the story a bit, he is like lured away by this guy named Dvorak, and Dradin is a missionary, and so he's telling them that he's, you know, a missionary or a man of the cloth or whatever, and Dvorak tells him that, you know, holy men are worth even more during this time, because there's a lot of dismemberment that happens at the freshwater festival. And then, jumping ahead in A History of Ambergris, we learned that one of Ambergris's rulers, he would like collect body parts of saints, and they would often, maybe not often, but sometimes they were from saints that were dead and mummified or whatever. Other times he would take body parts from saints that were still alive. And so it doesn't say it, but I'm pretty sure that is kind of what inspired this freshwater festival. And the gray caps seem to have something to do with it as well, but I definitely think, especially because they say that, you know, like holy men, saints, are worth even more. And I think it's because of that history element of the guy collecting parts of saints. But in the end of Dradin, so this is kind of a spoiler for this one, but I already warned you there would be spoilers. So anyway, Dradin in love, he is in love with this woman he has seen in a window. And in the end, he reaches her and he finds out she is just a mannequin and is not even real at all. And there's this great passage that he talks about. And remember, Dradin, like we learn about him and his childhood throughout this story. And yeah, he's kind of losing it. And so when he finds out that she's not even a real person, it reads, "It did not matter that she was not real, for he could see now that she was his salvation. Had he not been in love with what he saw in the third-story window, and had what he had seen through that window changed in its essential nature? Wasn't she better suited to him than if she had been real, with all the avarices and hungers and needs and awkwardnesses that create disappointment? He had invented an entire history for this woman, and now his expectations of her would never change, and she would never age, never criticize him, never tell him that he was too fat or too sloppy or too neat, and he would never have to raise his voice to her." And it kind of goes on about how, like, she's even more perfect because she's not real. And obviously his parents did not have a good relationship, and so he sees the fact that she's just a mannequin being like, now this relationship will never be a disappointment. This is perfect. And he ends up because she's a mannequin that has been in pieces. And so in the end, he takes her head and runs off. And I was hoping we would learn more about Dradin in the following stories, but the story of Dradin in love is brought up, but we never learn more about Dradin himself. So I was kind of disappointed by that. But yeah, so I thought this was a great intro into Ambergris. And then the next story is a brief history about Ambergris written by Duncan Shriek. And this one, because it's like a document or a pamphlet telling the history, I kind of didn't expect it to be as interesting. However, I was wrong. And this one, I don't know if it was my favorite, but it was one of my favorites because it was fascinating. Like I said, Vandermeer has created the details of this, it's just so detailed. And of course, Ambergris being the weird, bizarre place it is, it has a bizarre history, and so it was fascinating to learn about it. And we are also introduced to Duncan Shriek in this story, and he has the footnotes he includes throughout this history, and it just shows his personality, I guess. And so it was a fun way to get to know him in that way as well. And like I said, we are shown a little bit into the Grey Caps and Dradin, and then this one, we learn more about them because the Grey Caps make up a big part of the history of Ambergris because they were there before the people were. And so you learn more about them, but they are still mysterious enough at this point. And then next up is the transformation of Martin Lake. And this one might have been the one I heard the most about. And so maybe I had high expectations, but I did find this one interesting. It is about the artist Martin Lake and how he went from being a nobody artist to suddenly creating this new art wave and becoming the most famous Ambergrisian artist, aside from Fassbender, who is a famous composer turned politician. And in the story, it starts with Fassbender's death, and it's creating the feuds between the people as far as those that had been in favor of Bender and those who hadn't. And then Lake is invited to an event, and at this event, he is shown that Fassbender is still alive, and they tell him to kill him. And they're all wearing masks, and so he doesn't know who these other people are. But yeah, so he kills Fassbender, and then this, of course, just changes his life and transforms who he is and how he paints. And throughout, while we're being told this story through Lake's perspective, we get snippets of Janice Shriek giving analysis on his paintings and describing them. And once again, the paintings are described so vividly. It felt like it was a real painting because I could just see it so clearly in my mind's eye. And I wonder if there's some Vandermeer fan who's an artist and who created these drawings in real life, because yeah, they're just detailed so well that I feel like you could just draw it based on how he describes it. But yeah, this one, it was kind of conspiracy theory-esque maybe, because he thinks that it is, so there's these feuding houses in Ambergris, feuding companies, and so he thinks that some of the people from those companies are who had Fassbender die because they didn't want him involved in the politics or something. But yeah, this was a good one and I enjoyed it. And we're introduced to Janice Shriek, who will come into play later in Shriek and Afterward, the second book in the series. So yeah, this was a good one too. And then the final fourth book is The Strange Case of X. And this one is very meta because the character of X is basically Jeff Vandermeer himself. And there is a twist in this story, and I've read other people say that it was super predictable and they knew it was going to come, the twist. but I did not see it coming. So I was taken by surprise, and I really enjoyed this one. It's like a writer who is gone crazy and thinks this world he created is becoming real. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one. There's also an event in this story that plays a part in the next book of Shriek. So yeah, I really loved this one. And this one might be my favorite of the series because there's just so many different stories here and so much detail, and it's so immersive, and you really get to know Ambergris. And you learn about the Grey Caps, but there's still a lot of mystery about them, and they're so intriguing. And it leaves you with questions, I suppose, but you could just read this one on its own, and it would still be like a complete experience, I guess. But there are more, and the next one is Shriek and Afterward, and this is like written by Janice Shriek. So her brother Duncan has disappeared once again, and so she decides to write his biography as an afterword to that Ambergrisian history pamphlet he had written. And so she writes about his life, and as well as hers, since they're siblings. And then once she's done with it, she kind of disappears. And then Duncan comes back and he finds this manuscript. And so he goes through and he annotates it. And so as we're reading Janice's perspective on things, Duncan will interject and share his perspective and his opinions on what she is writing. And I've never read a book written like this, and I loved it. I thought it was such a unique idea. And I also enjoyed the sibling relationship between Janice and Duncan. And we also learn even more about the Grey Caps because Duncan has this obsession with them. And at this point, the Grey Caps live underground. And so he will travel underground and be under there for like ages. And so we just learn more about them. And because he is traveling underground, he gets this fungal disease, which his body is like taken over by fungus and mushrooms. Sometimes, like as time goes on, he's able to control it. And so he will look like he's gained weight because he's keeping so much inside. Because if he just let it all go, he would just be like covered in mushrooms, essentially. So that was really fascinating with that. And then in the second half, there's a war that happens between those two feuding houses, and the Grey Caps help one of the houses and provide them with like fungal bombs and guns. And so like a lot of people at that time are like part mushroom and part fungus because of these fungal bombs and guns and stuff that they're using. So that was just really interesting. And this book is a slow burn, especially the first half, I would say. However, the second half is when the war between those two houses happens and things kind of pick up speed at that point. But also, like, at the beginning of the book, it takes place at an event, and there's an event that happens between Janice and Duncan's ex, who is named Mary. And so we know that something happened between the two of them at this party, and it keeps being referenced as a way to like pique our interest throughout the whole book. And then in the end, when we finally learn what happened at the event, it wasn't even that big of a deal. Like, I don't know. I guess I won't get too detailed. If you've read the books, you know what event I'm talking about. But I don't know. They kept talking about it as if it was something huge. And then when we find out what it is, it was just like, that was all. But as this book is written, we do see that Janice is an unreliable narrator, in part because Duncan will call her out on certain things, but also at the end of the book, she tells us about some lies of omission that she has not told us about throughout this book, like that were a big deal. And so I like that, though. I like when the narrator is like, you can't totally tell how much of the truth they're telling you. But by the end of the book, so in A Strange Case of X, he is in jail because he has killed Janice Shriek by pushing her in front of a car. And so at the end of Shriek, we learned that Janice has died because she was hit by a car. So it all connects right there. And then Duncan, we don't really know what happens to him at the end, though he's just kind of disappeared. And so this book, like some questions are answered, maybe, but ultimately it leaves you with a lot of questions, especially with the Grey Caps, because like I said, we learn more about them through Duncan. And then there is this door he talks about, and it somehow correlates with the Silence, which is an event where like a ton of Ambergrisians went missing and nobody knows what happened to them. And they think the Grey Caps killed them or something, but there's a lot of mystery around it. And so it's talking about this door and how it connects to the Silence, but then it never really explains it to us. So after I finished it, I was like, what is that? Like that's all he's gonna tell us about it? And I was pleasantly surprised, though, to discover that the door is explained in Finch. And so I thought Finch was going to be more of a standalone book, and like I said, it can be. But it answers questions that you had from Shriek. So that was a pleasant surprise, because I thought I was just going to be left hanging and never know what this door was. But onto Shriek. So this one it's like a take on the noir murder mystery. And Finch is the main detective who is in charge of solving this double murder. So a man and a gray cap have been killed. And this is taking place like hundreds of years after Duncan and Janice, after their time in Ambergris. So a lot of time has passed. And the gray caps have risen and are not now in charge of Ambergris. And Finch, the character Finch, he is a detective because the gray caps told him. So they are just in charge now, and they were like, you're now a detective. And he just had to do it. And so yeah, so this one, like I said, it's the most sci-fi-esque, and I almost want to say it's the weirdest, especially if you went into this not having read the others. Like, I don't know, because the gray caps have taken over, there's just so much more fungus and mushrooms everywhere. And there are people that are called partials, which are part mushroom, part human. And then you have other people that will be infected by the gray caps, and they are like taken over by this fungus and will eventually die. Actually, I don't think they will die. I think they just transform into something inhuman unless someone does kill them. And so speaking of this, like side tangent, there are some things from these books that it reminded me of the Southern Reach. And so there's definitely some ideas in Ambergris that Vandermeer took and like applied to Area X. And obviously the two series are very different, but yeah, there's kind of like some overlapping ideas there. Anyway, Finch's partner, White, he is someone who has been infected with, spores, and he is transforming into this, like these mushrooms and stuff all over him. It was weird, but it would have been even weirder had I not read Shriek, because in Shriek, that was happening to Duncan. And so it kind of prepares you for what's happening to White, which kind of takes things a step further. But this book, there were like some cliche things that happened, but I think maybe it was meant to be cliche because it's, like I said, it's kind of like a take on the noir mysteries or whatever, detective stories. And so maybe it was supposed to be cliche since those noir stories tend to be cliche. But then there were also other times where it felt like he was trying too hard in some ways, like either too hard to be weird or trying too hard just in general. Like there is a torture scene where Finch is being tortured, and that scene was just way too over the top and unnecessary, and I didn't understand the point of it. And then also, like the last quarter or so kind of drags on, but then when the ending happens, like it seems like it ends abruptly. Like things were happening and it could have kept going, but then it just ends. And it's like, man, like things were dragging so long, and now it's getting interesting, and then it ends. So I didn't love the pacing of the book. But I did love how we learn about the door, and spoiler alert once again, the door is like a portal that can travel through time and space, and turns out the gray caps are like aliens who accidentally ended up in this city on Earth, but they decided they liked it. And so now they're trying to create this huge door to allow more of their species to come to Ambergris. And then Duncan, he had been going through this door and traveling through time, and so he becomes part of the story of Finch, and so I loved that he came back and became part of the story. And also, so there's this other character named Bliss who is also able to transport himself using this door, and so he, goes back and forth in time. And he's the one that finds Duncan Shriek, and they say that he is underground, and he had been like curled up near where Samuel Tauncher's body was found. And Samuel Tauncher, for those who don't know, he was a monk who went underground like in the very beginning when Ambergris was first founded. And his journal is like a huge part of Ambergrisian history, talking about his time underground. And that part was fascinating. I really loved that. That was one of the reasons I enjoyed A Brief History of Ambergris, that part in City of Saints and Madmen, because Samuel Tauncher's journal was just really interesting. But anyway, there's a part, I should have highlighted it, but where Bliss, I believe, is talking to Finch, and he makes the remark saying something like, "Who do you think Samuel Tauncher is anyway?" kind of a thing. And I thought he was kind of alluding to the fact that Duncan Shriek is Samuel Tauncher, maybe? Like with the time travel stuff. Eventually, the way Duncan Shriek dies is by traveling back in time, where he is Samuel Tauncher, and then he's the one who writes this journal. But I don't know, I could be wrong about that. So if you've read the series, I would love to know if I'm just making this up or if you found something there as well. Because there's definitely, Samuel Tauncher is such a huge part of these stories. And so it would make sense, right? If it turns out that Duncan Shriek and Samuel Tauncher are the same person and they use these doors that the Grey Caps have in order to travel through time. And it explains it explains how Samuel Tauncher was able to survive being underground with the Grey Caps for so long, right? But I don't know, I'm still trying to think of that one, if I think that is the case or not. But anyway. And then also with Finch, similar to Shriek, Finch keeps referring to his secret past as if it's some huge secret, and then we learn what his past was, and it felt underwhelming. Like, so his dad was like a spy, and I don't know, he acted like he has this huge hidden secret, and then it felt like it was just not even that big of a secret. And then also, something I did like though, is how early on in the book he talks about, because one of the Grey Caps has been killed, and he talks about how like it takes a lot of patience to kill a Grey Cap. So someone had a lot of patience to kill this guy. And then we also learned that he has killed a Grey Cap before. And so those two things where it's like, it takes a pretty violent person with a lot of patience to kill one, and Finch has killed one. And so it kind of gives you insight into who he is, what he's capable of. And then we do get a flashback into that event. And he also has to kill White because White is transforming and he's going to become a monster unless he's killed. And that part, that was one of those cliche parts where it's like, oh, the guy has to go in and mercy kill his partner, and it's so gruesome. And that scene isn't described to us, but, you know, it's insinuated that it is a gruesome affair. But yeah, I don't know. Finch, there were times when I was like, wow, this is my favorite. But when all is said and done, it might have been my least favorite. I don't know. I really like Shriek. I love City of Saints and Madmen, so I'm pretty sure that one is my favorite. And Shriek, I don't know. I loved Shriek, but it left me with so many questions. So I don't know. It's hard to pick which is my least favorite. But I'm pretty sure City of Saints and Madmen is my favorite. However, I would recommend the other two as well. And yeah, if Vandermeer ever opens up the door to Ambergris again and writes more stories, I would definitely buy the books and read all about it. Speaking of which, I mentioned this in my Southern Reach video, but he will be writing more books to go along with the Southern Reach, so more books with Area X. So I am so excited for those to come out. But yeah, I guess I can't think of anything else I wanted to say about Ambergris. I guess that wraps up my thoughts on all the books, but highly recommend them. They are very weird and trippy, as I said, and they can get kind of gruesome at times. But Finch is the most gruesome, I would say. Like, the other two aren't that bad, and then Finch, there's times where he takes things a bit too far, in my opinion. But I still enjoyed it overall, and like I said, a lot of questions are answered in Finch. But yeah, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have read these books, I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Just what you liked, what you didn't like about them, what you agree with me on as far as the stories go, and what you disagree with me on. Yeah, I know a lot of people didn't like in Finch because the Grey Caps are in charge. We see so much more about them and learn so much more. And some people don't like that because they liked the mystery of the Grey Caps in the first two books. But I don't know, I liked when they had mystery, but I was also totally fine learning more about them, and I found that part interesting. So yeah, anyway, I'm kind of rambling now. So I will just wrap this up and ask that you subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram and like and comment on this video. I love interacting with the people that are watching these. So if you've read these books, I would love to hear from you. Also, Vandermeer is releasing new editions of these books on January 11th. So there are these awesome covers. I will post them so you can see. They are paperback. I wish they were hardcover, but I will probably buy these editions as well to add to my collection. But yeah, thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.